for the reserves to earn money for college. She was a student in Baptist Hospital's nursing program. Beth is a medical technician for air evacuation units in the Air Force. Taking a quick look now at Nashville's weather. Currently in Nashville, 35 degrees with clear skies. Winds from the southwest at 5. The barometer 30.25 and rising. Humidity 89%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the latest developments of the Gulf War. NBC will bring you 24-hour coverage of the latest happenings in the Middle East. And Channel 4 will bring you local updates every half hour. Our next update, 1:25.
I have to make the announcement that tonight, Washington time, during the night in Israel, there has been an unprovoked attack by Iraq, launching Scud missiles, or perhaps improved Scud missiles, at purely civilian targets in Israel.
The Israeli ambassador to the United States announcing the first attack that escalated the Persian Gulf War. Allied attacks on military targets in Iraq and Iraqi-occupied Kuwait continue now, more than 30 hours after they began, and several hours after the Iraqis launched a missile attack on Israel. Several Scud missiles slammed into a densely populated Tel Aviv neighborhood before dawn, damaging several cars and buildings. 7 people reportedly suffered minor injuries. President Bush has reacted to the attack, saying he is outraged. The United States has assured Israel's prime minister that it is attacking Iraq's mobile missile launchers. Those attacks have caused massive damage, as these pictures from Baghdad show. Returning pilots have said anti-aircraft fire is intense. Meantime, Air Force B-52Gs are reported carpet bombing Kuwait to soften up Iraqi army positions there for a likely Allied ground attack. In another development, the Pentagon has identified the first U.S. casualty in the Gulf War as Navy Lieutenant Commander Michael Spiker, a 33-year-old fighter pilot from the aircraft carrier Saratoga. His FA-18 fighter bomber was shot down over Iraqi territory yesterday. He is officially listed as missing in action. The Pentagon just recently, within the last few hours, announced that yet another American fighter pilot has been lost. Garrick?
Mary Alice, as we're talking about the airstrikes, and of course waiting for more information about the success of these strikes and also the fate of the pilots who are manning those planes. It's not just American planes. There are also Saudi planes, some Kuwait pilots, and a good-sized detachment of the Royal Air Force, British pilots, flying these missions, taking off from Saudi Arabia. And we want to get a perspective, some information on that, not just what the British are up to, but the real meaning and significance of this air war, the use of these high-technology weapons, the cruise missiles. Every war seems to turn a page in the chapter of military technology. New weapons are developed, new weapons are used, strategies have to be rewritten. And we're going to get some expert background information on that from Air Chief Marshal Sir Michael Armitage, who is the head of the Royal College of Defence Studies in Great Britain. He's in our office in London this morning. Good morning, Sir Michael.
Yes, good morning, Garrick.
I'd like to get your opinion as an expert on this in terms of your appreciation of the significance, not the success, but the significance of what we are witnessing in Iraq in these airstrikes.
In the airstrikes, well, this is the first major war in which modern high technology has really been allowed to play a full role. And even from the very first waves of attacks, it became clear that electronics in particular were going to be a very important and perhaps decisive factor, especially in the air war. The equipment that the Allied air forces have had made a tremendous impact on the Iraqis. It must have given them a tremendous shock, and I think it's exceeded even our own Allied expectations in the success that we've so far achieved.
I imagine there are a great number of military contractors who are breathing a bit more easily today, knowing that their weapon systems and their electronic equipment has apparently been working so successfully. What we've also seen is more than 100 of these Tomahawk cruise missiles being used against key targets inside Iraq. They too appear to be working. Does the fact that we're having these unmanned missiles, which are so precise, really going to change the face of warfare, aerial warfare, in the future?
I doubt it. They're going to do for air power in the future what they've so far done in this war, and that is to take out some key initial targets such as the command and control nodules, but there's no substitute for having air crew with their tactical judgment and situational awareness being in the combat area. And as you've seen on the newsreels, the initial Tomahawk attacks, highly successful, were the prelude only to the massive manned aircraft offensive which was then launched.
I know there are security concerns here, but again, given your experience in the Royal Air Force, could you walk us through, or perhaps fly us through, a mission of one of your British pilots or what an American pilot on a bombing mission would be doing? He takes off, or they take off if it's a two-man crew. They know their destination. They have their coordinates, I imagine. But what are they actually doing? What are they thinking? Just fly us through it from the moment they approach their target until they actually lock on and deliver their bombs.
Well, it might be arrogant for me, I think, to put myself in the situation of these combat crews because I'm sitting in the comfort of a London studio. What I would like to say is that the whole cycle of attack starts long before that. It starts, of course, with an intelligence gathering exercise and with an analysis of that intelligence. Tremendous advantage we have over the Iraqis in that field. The information then is turned into targeting information, and the crews would go off, in this case of the tornadoes, at very low level, at which we're extremely well practiced, monitoring some high technology systems again, especially electronic systems, which would take the crew to the target.
Do the pilots actually see the target? Because these raids, the initial ones, took place in the middle of the night. So what are they actually looking at?
Well, they wouldn't see very much, to be quite honest, because we're into a 4-day or 4-night moonless period at the moment. It's dark, all right. And reading some of the reports from the crews that have taken part in the airfield attacks, all they saw as they flashed over the target was a glimpse of a perimeter fence or some other airfield feature. They were not going in visually, they were being guided in by radar.
So it really is the high technology that is not doing the flying, but is doing the aiming, the precision targeting, if you will, there.
Oh, yes, we have some automatic aiming systems, yes.
If you look at the human factor now, not just the razzle-dazzle and the highly successful use of these new weapons and electronic gear, but the human factor, those pilots, what is the fatigue factor? I mean, how many missions can they fly before they have to rest?
That's again rather more difficult. There's no doubt that operational missions with all this anti-aircraft defense that they're having to cope with, there's an enormous strain on the crews, emotional and physical strain. But you must also remember that the squadrons don't have one crew per aircraft. The usual NATO standard on which we used to work, and probably still do even out there, is that we had one crew plus half a crew for each aircraft. So the crews themselves will be rotating, but the aircraft will be going back on each mission. I imagine that the crews will be doing one mission per 24 hours, little more than that.
All right, Sir Michael, put yourself now in a different position. You're not in the London studio. You're somewhere in Baghdad or an Iraqi military base, and you are the chief of the Iraqi Air Force. And you have your planes, some Soviet planes, some French-built Mirage planes. What do you do with your planes?
Well, that is difficult, isn't it? I try to keep them in the hardened aircraft shelters, of which the Iraqi aircraft has a fair number on their 30 or so major air bases. And I would have my teams out there trying to patch up the runways as fast as I could in order to get some of my fighters off, so that I could at least shoot down some of the attacking Allied aircraft. But it does seem that the Iraqis haven't been able to manage even that so far. I would also be trying to get more results out of my surface-to-air missiles. But the problem I would face as commander of the Iraqi Air Force is that my command and control system and my communication system has been so severely disrupted, and I can't even talk to half of my guys. And anyway, a lot of them are in the shelters. They must be terrified. The world has never seen anything like this before.
You are surprised by what has transpired there?
I think I'm surprised by two things: that so many untried high-technology bits of kit have worked not only well, but together, And I think I'm very surprised, pleasantly surprised, I hasten to add, at the extremely low casualty rate. I mean, it must be something like 0.1%. During the 1939-45 war in Europe, we got up to loss rates of 11% on some missions. I mean, that was unusual, but 11% of the aircraft didn't come back.
Finally, Sir Michael, we appreciate the time and the information and really the perspective you've been able to give us on what actually happens on these missions. And not to be unfair, but imagine again you are that Iraqi chief of Air Force and you have all this bad news around you. You probably really don't know what's happening at air bases. Your pilots are worried. Your planes aren't going up.
Yep.
And you got a boss named Saddam Hussein. And he's back there in Baghdad, and he's in a bunker, and maybe he doesn't like bad information. And assuming you can communicate with him, what do? Do you tell him, Saddam, it's all over?
I might try and do that if I were pretty sure his assassination squads weren't outside the door, but you are moving towards the most satisfactory outcome that the war could possibly produce, and that would be that as head of the Air Force, I might be able to talk to some other guys and go and get rid of Saddam Hussein myself. That would be the end of the war, and it would save an awful lot of lives.
Sir Michael Armitage, thank you very much. We'll see whether that scenario is indeed something which works out. Sir Michael Armitage, Air Chief Marshal, head of the Royal College of Defence Studies in Great Britain, speaking with us from London. Mary Alice?
This high-tech war has, for the most part, thwarted high-tech television's ability to bring you many of the pictures of the battle. One spectacular exception is footage shot last night of the first surprise strike on the capital city of Baghdad. BBC producer Anthony Massey was there, part of the team. Excuse me, he's with us now from Amman, Jordan. Welcome, Anthony.
Good evening.
Was there any difficulty, first of all, in getting that footage out of Baghdad to Amman?
Well, there was some. The Iraqis were quite willing to let us leave the country, but apart from giving us a document entitling us to go, they provided no assistance. So we had to provide our own transport and negotiate our way across the border as best we could. That has taken some 12 or 18 hours.
We are looking at the footage that you shot last night. Can you tell us about the circumstances under which it was shot?
Right, well, the raid came at 2:40 in the morning Baghdad time. We had some suggestion of it from Washington that it might be coming at about that time, but it took the Iraqis completely by surprise. What you see is a great deal of Iraqi anti-aircraft fire from the ground, tracer, some missiles, but it's firing at nothing because there are no planes there. This attack was of cruise missiles. When they come in, you see a silver and white glow, which then rapidly dies away. That's the missile hitting its target on the ground. But all the other noise and fire is very ineffective Iraqi anti-aircraft fire, shot off at random into the sky.
How close were you to the action? Did you feel at any time as though your life was in jeopardy?
Well, to be honest, we felt that all the time. The cruise missiles were very accurately targeted, and their precision was really something to behold. But nonetheless, one passed right over the roof of the hotel and demolished the telecommunications center about half a mile away and made an enormous explosion, which I saw from my bedroom window. And another series of explosions about a mile away I watched from an open window, and I could feel the walls of heat pushing me back into the room, even though it was about a mile away.
What of the presidential palace? We've gone back and forth all day with reports on whether or not it had been damaged. Did you see any of it?
Well, of course, there are about 6 presidential palaces in Baghdad, so there's no guarantee that he's in any one of them at any time. I saw what appeared to be a cruise missile strike on the new presidential palace, which is incomplete. It seemed to hit the dome of the palace and cause some damage. But we were not allowed into the area when daylight came, so we've not been able to check out the damage ourselves.
What of the citizens of Baghdad? Were they reeling? Were they off the streets this morning?
They were off the streets, and they were deeply shocked. Ultimately, nobody from government down to ordinary citizens ever expected this would happen. They genuinely believed that the West did not mean it, and that if there was such an attack, it wouldn't last. It came as a great shock to them when it did happen, and an even greater shock when they realized that it was going to go on happening day and night for as long as the Allies choose to make it, with the result that we had a cruise missile strike of 2 missiles on the Ministry of Defense yesterday morning, and that really shook them up because they didn't think there was anything going to happen during the daytime. They've suddenly realized that this is real.
And we've heard so much about Saddam Hussein's isolation, the fact that he either is not getting in the information or doesn't believe what information he is getting. Certainly about the Allied power, the power of its missiles, its weaponry, and its aircraft. Can that kind of isolation have gone down to the Iraqi people so that they share it with their leader?
Well, I think they were always aware of what else was going on in the world, but they shared his perception that the West didn't mean it. But the interesting thing now is that Baghdad, at least, and possibly Iraq as a whole, seems to be rapidly falling to pieces. You can take the hotel as an example of that. I mean, the hotel where the journalist is staying, the Al Rashid, is rapidly becoming uninhabitable. There's no power, there's no water, they're running out of food, there are no phones, no air conditioning. And for several blocks around the hotel, the buildings are unusable, the streets are empty. Baghdad itself was emptying out pretty rapidly before the attack. Now the streets are really deserted except for soldiers. The traffic lights don't work. People are not going into their jobs. Those who do don't have their minds on their jobs at all. They're just thinking about what's going to happen next and whether they can get out. So the country does feel as though it's teetering on the brink, certainly within the capital, of collapsing altogether.
And that can go one of two ways for a population. They can either start looking around for white flags, or it can solidify their resolve. Which is it, do you know?
Well, I think possibly neither. Iraq is not a real country, really. It's not like the United States, where, although the population comes from all over the world, it means something to say, I am an American. It doesn't mean much to many Iraqis to say, I am an Iraqi. They'd far rather say, I'm a Kurd, or I am Turkish, or I am Iranian. So if the reason Iraq continues to exist is through the brute force and wishful thinking, if you like, of Saddam Hussein, if you take that away, the country has the capability of falling apart very fast.
Thank you so much for being with us and for your great camera work, Anthony Massey of the BBC. Garrick?
Well, Mary Alice, talking about countries falling apart or holding together, one country which holds together very well despite its internal strains is, of course, Israel. And it's the country really now which is on the front line, although not at all part of the coalition or alliance arrayed against Iraq. It became a participant, or at least a target, with those Iraqi Scud missile attacks against Israel, which injured 7 people slightly today. Larry Wyden of NBC News has been monitoring the ongoing events there, where it's well into Friday, and where a cabinet meeting is scheduled. Any information yet from government sources as to what may be happening in Jerusalem during this cabinet session, Larry?
No, not yet, Garrick. Usually cabinet meetings are relatively regular affairs. They show up at the Prime Minister's office, and the cameras are there taking pictures of the members of the cabinet going in. But during crisis situations, the cabinet tends to meet out of sight. There's more security in terms of cameras and so forth. So we're being kept away. And at this point, we don't have any word yet on what the cabinet has decided, if anything. They may, in fact, not even make a decision today. They may well hold it off until Sunday to see whether a promised American action in Iraq is suitable retaliation for the missiles that fell on Tel Aviv this morning.
Larry, you may be onto something. Of course, the issue the cabinet is grappling with today in Jerusalem is whether to retaliate for those Iraqi attacks overnight. And the Israeli government a statement was made today that they've been given assurances by the United States that the U.S. Air Force would take care of those missile launchers. Of course, the problem is that they are mobile missile launchers, about 40 of them, according to the intelligence of the reports of the Israeli Defense Ministry. Larry, as I'm sure the newspapers are out now, radio is on, as you were saying a moment ago, everybody in Israel monitors the radio. What is the tone you're picking up from these non-government public sources in the media in terms of what happened last night? Are there commentaries? Are there call-in shows, talk shows that give one a feeling as to what the people in the street are how they're reacting today?
Well, the overriding consideration, I think, is the fact that people waking up or who spent the night awake in their sealed rooms wearing their gas masks were well aware that something was going on, so it came as no surprise when the sun came up this morning and there had been an attack. But the principal thing that I think is the subject of discussion is the fact that the weapons that were used were conventional weapons and not the chemical weapons, which were feared, mostly psychological weapons, I think. They would be more likely to cause harm to the mental health than the physical health of the citizens of Tel Aviv.
Well, Larry, we're looking at some of the damage right now caused by these conventional missiles. These are the ones in Tel Aviv. It struck an outlying area of Tel Aviv, a rather poor neighborhood, we understand. Is that correct?
That's right. It was an area of apartment blocks, and it pretty well wiped out a three-story building and some surrounding private houses and cars in the street. Amazingly enough, the injuries apparently are relatively minor, less than a dozen people hurt. One ironic twist, there were probably 3 times that many people who've been admitted to hospitals suffering either heart attacks or nervous conditions because they thought they had been gassed or had run into chemical weapons.
The power of suggestion, certainly. We see here the various civil defense and rescue units that have gone to the scene to help people there. Which really brings us to the question of mobilization. When a country is at war or on the verge of war, or in the case of Israel knows that it could be a target and now has become a target, everybody is mobilized emotionally. But Israel, more than most countries, really mobilizes its people. How many of the reserves have been called up, and to what extent has personal family life been disrupted there?
Well, of course, the actual figures are closely held as a security matter, but it comes as no surprise as you drive through the streets of Tel Aviv, even as late as actually the night that the war began. A couple of nights ago, we were out around midnight or so in Tel Aviv, and there were reservists showing up at various pickup points. This call-up has been in keeping with the overall Israeli position, relatively low-key. We haven't seen convoys of army trucks headed off to bases out in the Negev or in the north. It's been done on a more individual basis, a more selective basis, depending on the individual need of the units and so forth. Israel is a country virtually of citizen soldiers. Almost everybody is in the army in one form or the other. And so it's not an unusual thing. And I think, as you mentioned, the mobilization of the civilian population in terms of preparation with sealing rooms, preparing gas masks, and so forth, was probably a factor, certainly, in keeping the injury toll down in the attack this morning.
Certainly, Larry, the Israelis were not surprised that this happened to the extent that perhaps many Iraqis appear to have been surprised, although they shouldn't have been, by the intensity, the scope, and the depth of the air attacks there. Thank you very much, Larry Weidman in Tel Aviv. I know you're going to continue to stand by as we wait for results of the Israeli cabinet meeting to see whether it takes any position in terms of retaliation against Iraq for those missile attacks. Israel wasn't the only target. Saudi Arabia is the other big target, and in the several hours ago, the Iraqis also tried to launch a missile against Saudi Arabia. There was an alert at Dhahran. This is the Dhahran there in northeastern Saudi Arabia.
Get inside, please. Okay. It is probably about 4:30. I'm going to put this down for a second to put on my chemical mask.
This is the scene in the hotel there. Journalists, after a missile exploded, a second missile that was fired at Saudi Arabia, the same target area, was destroyed by an American ground-to-air missile.
This area is under threat of imminent attack any second. We should be prepared to go to the base or go to the shelters immediately. We're all prepared to get out of here. Sounds of something overhead, and there was a large explosion in the direction of the air base near here. As you can imagine, we're telling our people to get ready to get out of here and get to shelter as soon as they can.
Arthur Kent in Saudi Arabia is on the line via satellite. Arthur, we're showing the tape of what actually happened there during the missile attack, the alert. You went through that. Tell us how you felt.
That's right, Garrick. Well, it was very odd indeed, because we were just getting reports in, and we're very anxious, of course, about our colleagues in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. We were trying to understand exactly what was happening in Israel with the Scud attacks there, when suddenly the alarms went, and the choice had to be head for the shelter or try to remain at our satellite position to continue sending out our stories and whatever information we had from this location. We scaled down to absolutely essential personnel, and most of our NBC colleagues went downstairs. It's a process of just trying to settle down to the reality that there is, in the judgment of the military authorities here, a real risk of incoming bombs or missiles. You don't know what. Your mind is wandering and wondering exactly what sort of risk is out there.
Arthur,
and in the extreme discomfort and lack of oxygen, Garrick, it's not a pleasant place to be.
It's not a pleasant place, even in many other places that are not at all pleasant, including Afghanistan, where I know you've come under fire. Is the feeling different here from Afghanistan?
As a matter of fact, Garrick, I couldn't help but think last night, since on 2 occasions in Afghanistan, I was on the receiving end of Soviet-made Scud missiles. It was an eerie feeling to once again be there, this time Saddam's version.
Well, Arthur Kent, one never gets used to that, being under fire, whether it's Soviet missiles or Iraqi missiles or whatever. Thank you very much for that live report, and we'll be right back after a brief break.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. Iraq's Saddam Hussein has finally struck back, but many military experts say the blow was not a strong one. It happened about 6 p.m. Nashville time. Iraq launched missiles against Israel and Saudi Arabia. And several of the Scud missiles did hit in Israel, but they did not do extensive damage. According to Israel, only 7 people were injured. No one was killed. One concern now whether Israel will strike back at Iraq. If Israel is at war with an Arab country, it'll be difficult for the Arab nations allied with the U.S. to hold together, and the alliance could be threatened. Israel's ambassador spoke in Washington and said his nation was reserving the right to retaliate. So far, they have not. But late tonight, Israel is hinting it may soon take action against Iraq. The other Iraqi missile was aimed at Saudi Arabia, but a U.S. Patriot missile destroyed it in midair, as it was designed to do. Meantime, the air attack against Iraq continues. Hundreds of additional air sorties were flown today as the U.S. and its allies pounded away at positions in Iraq. Allies have begun to suffer some casualties. One U.S. plane was blown out of the air, the pilot believed killed. A British plane went down too. The crew is believed to have bailed out somewhere over Iraq. And a Kuwaiti jet was also lost in battle yesterday. So far, the action is still confined to the air, and there is no indication if and when a ground assault will begin. One local rabbi says he looks for a strong response from the Israelis to knock Saddam's missiles out. Rabbi Randall Falk says he believes Arabs will understand Israel's response, noting that Israel did not fire the first shot.
Most of us were aware that Hussein would follow through on his threat, and we were aware that Israel was taking a calculated risk by following American request that they remain on low profile and remain out of the situation until attacked. But this is part of the responsibility of allies in trying to keep a coalition together.
Falk's opinion is not the universal one. Others feel Israel may not retaliate, at least not anytime soon. That would be to help the U.S. in its alliance with other Arabs in the war against Iraq.
Are your bills piling higher and higher? At Security Pawnbrokers, we can help. We can give you quick cash at our location on 21st Avenue South. We make loans on all kinds of merchandise, like jewelry, diamonds, and furs, stereo equipment, musical instruments, and home electronics. And yes, we even take stock certificates. So when you need quick cash, come by and see us at Security Pawnbrokers on 21st Avenue South, or give us a call at 298-1345. We can help. Security Pawnbrokers. It's a place you'll tell your friends about.
Starving Artist Group Art Expo and Sale. Thousands of beautiful original oil paintings on canvas by talented professional artists. Giant sofa-sized paintings sold elsewhere for hundreds of dollars, as low as $25. Smaller paintings from $7. Absolutely positively no painting over $49. Professional artist quality at rock-bottom starving artist prices. This Sunday only in Nashville at the Marriott Hotel, I-40 at Briley Parkway, and in Murfreesboro at the Holiday Inn. This Sunday only, 11 to 4. Absolutely positively no painting over $49.
These are not happy days at Fort Campbell. Better than 19,000 soldiers from the base are on duty in the Mideast. For friends and families back at home, it's a time of worrying and waiting. And at the fort itself, they are preparing for the worst. hoping for the best. Dogs are being used to sniff trucks for bombs. The hospital is getting ready to handle wounded if they're brought there, and chaplains are counseling the families of those serving overseas. War is difficult to cope with regardless of whether you know someone involved in Operation Desert Storm or not. If you find yourself overwhelmed, help is also available for you. Trained counselors are on hand 24 hours a day at Crisis Call if you need someone to talk to. The number to call is 244-7444. Again, that's 244-7444, Crisis Call. Feel free to call. They're more than willing to help. And again, it's open 24 hours a day. Taking a quick look at Nashville's weather currently, it is 32 degrees with clear skies, winds from the south at 6, the barometer 30.25 and steady, and the humidity 96%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the latest developments of the Gulf War. NBC will bring you 24-hour coverage of the latest happenings in the Middle East, and Channel 4 will bring you local updates every half hour. Our next update at 1:55.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here are Garrick Utley and Mary Alice Williams.
As we continue our coverage through the night, waiting to see what developments may be occurring in the Persian Gulf. In Israel, we want to catch up with the latest development. U.S. and allied air forces are reportedly still pounding away at Iraq. We have some pictures from Baghdad after the allied bombing. The U.S. command, after long hours of bombardment of Iraqi targets, expressed satisfaction with the air offensive by Americans and allied planes. But the airplanes were running into reportedly some weather problems there. There's fog at this time of the year. A senior U.S. official says air attacks are continuing on Iraqi missile launchers, but adds there is no way to get every mobile missile site. In a military first, the Pentagon says an Iraqi Scud missile fired at Dhahran, Saudi Arabia was intercepted and knocked down by a U.S. Army Patriot surface-to-air missile. It's the first time a Patriot has been fired in combat, and it worked. The Israeli Army reports serious damage and some minor injuries after Iraqi missile struck Israel early Friday there. Israelis brace for protection against Iraqi chemical weapons, but an Army official there says none of the missiles carried chemical warheads. They were conventional warheads. The White House says President Bush is outraged over Iraq's missile attack on Israel, calling it further aggression. The Israeli ambassador to the United States, Zalman Shoval, condemned the attack as unprovoked, asked whether his country would retaliate. He declined to give a specific answer. On the ground, Allied tanks and troops were reported rumbling towards the Kuwaiti border at a possible desert showdown with the dug-in Iraqi forces in the occupied emirate of Kuwait. American defense chiefs clamped a near blackout on information about ground operations, and there is no new news reports or information reports coming in from the front lines there. The Pentagon is listing, unfortunately, naming the first known U.S. casualty in the Gulf action. It is Lieutenant Commander Michael Spiker, a 33-year-old Navy pilot. He was based at Cecil Field Naval Station in Jacksonville, Florida. He leaves a wife and 2 small children. We would just add one other item, and that is the war reports, if not war claims, from the other side, from Baghdad. They give a different picture, not surprisingly, to what has been happening there in the air and on the ground. An Iraqi military spokesman there on Friday in Baghdad claimed that the nation's air defense forces have shot down 5 more enemy aircraft, bringing to 65 the total number. 65, that is the Iraqi claim. Of course, nowhere near to what Allied sources are reporting as their losses, which are described as being very, very light. That's where we stand right now. Now over to Mary Alice.
And an hour, day and a half, I should say, into Operation Desert Sword, and we have reached a critical moment, a moment filled with uncertainty. Iraq escalated the war by attacking Israel. The world is waiting with some trepidation for Israel's response, which has not come yet. We're going to call in our colleagues around the world at important headquarters who are standing by and to watch that decision. The first, Larry Weidman, who is in Tel Aviv. Larry, what do you think the response is going to be?
Mary Alice, I'd hate to guess, but my suspicion is the Israelis will see this as exactly what they expected. An attack of a few missiles which did relatively little damage and caused few injuries and did not introduce non-conventional weapons. As Martin Fletcher reported earlier in the evening, had non-conventional weapons like chemical agents or nerve gases been used, there is virtually no question Israel would have responded instantly. But because of the Eagleburger visit last week and a meeting, subsequent phone call between Prime Minister Shamir and the White House, it is generally felt that Israel was prepared to accept a strike from Iraq without a retaliation in order to protect the American involvement with the Arab alliance.
What would be the difference in political impact between a response in kind, that is a few missiles, and a full-out attack?
Well, the Israelis probably could do more damage with their missiles than the Iraqis were able to. The Israeli missiles are more accurate, and they probably have better intelligence about where to aim them. But, and I wouldn't rule that out. It may well be that the Israelis feel that they're not willing to totally give up their option of demonstrating their unhappiness with having civilians randomly targeted. But the idea of sending a few missiles back or sending the Israeli Air Force to attack some targets still steps over the line. It raises the profile that much higher. And I think that as things stand now, the cabinet is meeting, and we'll maybe know something later. Benjamin Netanyahu has a news conference scheduled around noon in Tel Aviv. That's about an hour and a half from now. He may well, he's the deputy foreign minister now, and he may well have some indication of what the official government response is going to be.
All right, thank you, Larry Weidman in Tel Aviv. And whatever that response is, it is being very closely watched over at the State Department, where Lisa Myers is standing by. Lisa?
Good evening, Mary Alice. The Secretary of State has been very busy on this issue this evening. He spent most of the evening over at the White House talking not only to Israel's ambassador to the United States, but also directly to Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, urging Israel not to respond to this attack, and also reassuring Israel that the United States was continuing its effort to eliminate any threat to Israel. He also has been in touch with our Arab coalition partners. Baker spoke with, let's say, the Saudi, Egyptian, and Syrian ambassadors to this country. This is something that Baker had spent a great deal of time discussing with various Arab nations during his most recent trip to the Middle East. And as a result of this, the State Department is relatively confident. In fact, the Secretary of State received assurances that even if Israel does respond to this Iraqi attack, that Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and other Gulf states will continue its membership in the anti-Iraq coalition. The situation with Egypt is a little more ambiguous, but Mubarak has said that every nation that comes under attack has a right to respond. And as a result, the State Department is relatively confident that even if Israel does counterattack, Egypt too will stay in the coalition. The big question mark is Syria. Syria is a blood enemy of Iraq, but it also is in a formal state of war with Israel. So it may be that if Israel responds, that Syria could change sides in this war. Mary Alice?
Thank you, Lisa. All the more important that the U.S. and allied military forces keep the path of the war on track, that it doesn't turn around. Battles, as you know, can be unpredictable, can go either way. We're checking in at the Pentagon now with Jamie Gangel.
Mary Alice, we can confirm reports earlier that several Marines were hurt in some shelling on the ground. That's part of the report that troops on the ground are moving close to the border. But we want to repeat again, we have just been told repeatedly here at the Pentagon not to expect them to cross that border, that we're going to have an air war still for quite some time. We're going to have B-52s going after those elite tank divisions, the Republican Guard. We're going to have the A-10s, the Warthogs. Those are low-flying, very effective bombers going after tanks and Apache helicopters. But there still is great concern here tonight about those mobile Scud missiles that caused so much trouble earlier tonight. It's clear that Saddam still has a lot of weapons at his disposal that can cause a lot of trouble. I also just wanted, if Larry Weidman is still on the line from Israel, to ask him something that's being talked about here a lot at the Pentagon tonight. And that is what he thinks. There's a sense here that if the strike against Israel had happened yesterday, that it might have been much more likely that Israel would have retaliated, but that not only out of respect for the sensitive alliance and U.S. pressure, that Israel, because of the success of the U.S. bombing runs, has perhaps more respect for the U.S.'s ability to protect them in the coming days. If Larry has any thoughts about that.
Jamie, it certainly is an interesting element. That as I mentioned earlier, there was some euphoria yesterday among the population in general at the fact the American military, which has had its ups and downs in dealing in the Middle East, that it actually pulled off a very successful and spectacular mission. And I think there was some confidence in believing the American promises that the sites and weapons that were threatening Israel could be dealt with. But many of the military experts we talked to yesterday indicated a little bit of dubious response to how successful the raid really was. They felt that Iraq was still maintaining a very sizable and dangerous arsenal of both airplanes and missiles, even after the first wave. And I think that to a great extent that caution has been proved right, because as we've seen now, Saddam was waiting and apparently was willing to take that first strike himself in order to maybe lull everybody into a sense of safety.
Also, Saddam's troops, ground troops, are waiting. Those troops are battle-hardened after 8 years of war with Iran. They are experts fighting in the desert against Allied forces, many of whom have never heard a shot fired in anger, who have never fought in the desert. How formidable, Jamie, are the ground troops that our people are going to be facing?
Well, for exactly the reasons you just said. They are formidable, and that is a lot of the reason that the Air Force is going to be used so heavily. And again, these Tomahawk cruise missiles, and that we hear repeatedly from the Pentagon to expect a week, maybe 10 days of serious bombing before we try to engage there. Just wanted to wrap up one other thing, and that was the losses. They're really stressing here tonight that they feel that thus far it's very low. We had the one reported death of Navy pilot from Florida. We've heard that another Navy jet went down. Search and rescue is underway for that. There were 2 British jets that went down, 1 Kuwaiti, but they're still saying that's very low, and they attribute a lot of that success to these Tomahawk cruise missiles. They sent out 106 of them, 91% success rate, and those are unmanned, so that really takes care of places where it's even dangerous for the planes to go in.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Now we're going to bring in the White House, where Sandy Gilmore is standing by. Sandy, do you know what is foremost in the administration's mind tonight?
Well, I am certain that for most of the administration officials, most of the administration officials went to bed tonight just praying that Israel would not get involved in this. This is the worst case scenario. This is the White House's nightmare scenario, because if Israel gets involved in this conflict, it could easily bring conflagration to the entire region. Jordan could get involved. The Arab masses could take to the streets. And this is exactly what the White House has feared for many, many weeks. At the moment, it appears that this will not happen. It appears Israel is restrained, and that, of course, was the point behind 2 major White House statements that were issued, particularly one saying coalition forces in the Gulf are attacking missile sites and other targets in Iraq, as if to tell the Israelis, look, don't you get involved. We, the Americans and the other coalition forces, will take care of this for you. So I think that's the main concern for the moment, at least. It looks like it's gone away. It remains to be seen whether the Israelis will leave it up to the Americans and the other coalition forces. But for now, the White House, I'm sure, is relieved.
Sandy, you talked about Arabs taking to the streets. Somebody's taken to the streets in front of the White House. Are we hearing drums there?
You're hearing the drums. These drums have been going on for many, many days now. The number of demonstrators at the moment, though, has dwindled down to just a handful, perhaps a dozen or two at the most. But the drums continue. We don't think that the first family is able to hear the drums through the windows, the storm windows, and so forth at the White House. At least I certainly hope not, because if they can hear those drums, they're not. The president is not getting very much sleep.
It would be slightly rattling. Thank you, Sandy Gilmore at the White House, and we'll be checking in with all of you later. Now back to Garrick.
Mary Alice, for the men and women of Operation Desert Storm, these are truly times of anticipation, of concern, and in many ways excitement. Not only is that the case on the front lines, our correspondent Kenley Jones has also found it to be the case here on the home front. Here's his report.
For the most part, this has been an encouraging day for the wives of the men of the 24th Infantry Division. Because of American superiority in air power, the 24th Division would be one of the first U.S. ground forces to go up against the Iraqis when that time comes. And of course, the better our air power is to soften up the defenses, the less prospect there is of casualties for them. But all of this talk about Scud missiles and the prospect of chemical warfare by Iraq has to be unsettling for those families. I want to talk about that tonight with Pam Campbell, who is director of the Family Assistance Center here at Fort Stewart, the home of the 24th Division. What about that? Is this a major concern of the families?
Oh, it definitely is a concern. I don't know necessarily that it's a major concern. We've all been extremely scared about the deployment from the time that the alert started. However, we feel confident, that the equipment that they have and the shots and the pills and everything that they have access to, there won't be any problems.
But is this a feeling that it is simply a more dangerous type of warfare now, or does it matter how a loved one is killed?
Truthfully, I don't think it matters. I mean, we're all concerned about death, and we're all prepared in the case of death. But I think death is a tragedy, regardless of how it happens.
I know you yourself have a fiancé
yes.
in Saudi Arabia. Was it a relief to you when this finally started?
Yes, actually it was, and I'll be honest with you. When it first started, I initially was scared and frightened, and then I felt a sigh of relief, and I felt a little bit guilty about that. And then a chaplain earlier today was by my office, and he said that he had felt the same way, that he had felt a sigh of relief. He said he felt like it was a sigh of relief, but then he took a gasp of air, because it's starting again, so yes, it's like a friend said, it's the beginning of the end.
The Family Assistance Center is responsible for helping wives and dependents, whatever, for a wide variety of things, anything from getting an automobile fixed to
right.
finding a babysitter.
Right.
But this is a bit different than the Vietnam War, isn't it? In Vietnam, families dispersed all over the country, but this deployment happened so suddenly that no one knew how long it was going to last. So families have tended to remain around the fort in this area. Has that made it easier for the Army to take care of them?
It's definitely made it easier for the Army and for us to provide the services and give them the resources that they need at a time like this. And I think the family members need the support. They need each other. We've had so many people that have gone home to Mom. They thought it would be easier, and then they got home and they realized that Mom didn't have the right things to say that the wives here. She didn't really have the same feelings that they had here, and our chains of concerns work very, very well. They're very strong, and we need each other right now at a time like this. And I think that's a real positive thing. We've developed a lot of really good friendships that we might not have ever developed. It's really a tight clique, all of us. It's one big clique.
Has the Army improved its ability to help defendants more so than during Vietnam?
We learned a lot of lessons from Vietnam. The Army feels strongly that in order to keep the soldiers good soldiers and strong soldiers, and for retention, that they need to know that their spouses and their loved ones are being taken care of. And so we will do absolutely anything in our power to provide the services, the resources that they might need.
Is there a downside to this, though, that so many have remained in this area? In the event there were heavy casualties, would there be more concentrated grief? for the Army to deal with?
I don't think so. I think, again, we would have the support of each other, and the Army would be better because it would be easier for them to provide the assistance. In the case of a casualty, the spouse is assigned a casualty assistance officer that would stay with them for the duration to help them take care of all the matters that need to be taken care of, because that's a really stressful time, and these people are trained, and most of them have had experience doing it, so they know what to do, and they will stay with them, and that doesn't always happen, you know, off of a post.
Let's talk about a more pleasant subject, and that's about when the men come back.
Mm-hmm.
Are there problems with reunions after a long separation?
Yeah. And we already have some programs developed that the Army has developed, reunion type programs that the soldiers over there will go through some training, and we'll also provide the training here for the spouses, because it is a hard time. A lot of the wives have become a lot more independent, and they're used to giving the orders, and the kids are used to listening to them, and all of a sudden, you know, a new face comes into the house and starts giving orders, and yeah, it's a difficult time.
But if you have to choose between that and the alternative,
oh yeah,
it's
no
much
question.
better to deal with reunions.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll all look forward to that. Now back to New York.
Thank you, Kenley Jones, talking about some of the human dilemmas and problems faced by servicemen, servicewomen, and their families here at home. And they're not the only ones who face these problems. There's also the Arab American community in this country. We want to go to Washington and chat a bit with Khalil Jashan, who is the Executive Director of the National Association of Arab Americans. Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming in at this mid-evening hour.
Good morning to you.
As we talk about what is happening there, I think we want to talk more than just about policy. You are Arab American, an American, Palestinian origins. You have an interesting story because much of your family still lives in the Middle East, in Israel, yet you have a brother-in-law, we understand, who has been sent off to the Persian Gulf in an American uniform. How do you cope with all these currents and countercurrents, you yourself personally?
Well, this crisis has been, I think, for Arab Americans in general, probably the most emotional crisis of our history in this country, and it's a very burdensome, psychologically speaking and emotionally speaking, it's a very burdensome crisis because you're torn right in the middle. I mean, there we are. We're part of the United States of America. We are also part of the Arab world culturally. We're proud of our heritage. We're proud of our new country to which we have immigrated. And when you are faced with this situation where you feel like almost it's your country fighting a war against your people, it's not easy to cope with. And therefore, from the very beginning of this crisis, most Arab Americans felt that a diplomatic, peaceful solution to this crisis would be the best option, because the last thing we would like to see is fellow Americans killing fellow Arabs and vice versa, fellow Arabs killing fellow Americans.
But now, unfortunately, tragically, perhaps we're beyond that point of diplomatic possibilities. We are in a war. So how do you, Mr. Jashan, cope with it, in your words, personally?
Well, it's very difficult. For example, I mean, the developments of this evening, tonight, kind of brought this whole war closer home. I mean, it was already home in the sense, as you mentioned, my brother-in-law is on his way to the Gulf. I have several friends and colleagues from church, neighbors, and so on, friends who are in the Gulf with the troops. But in addition to that, with this dangerous development tonight, having family in the immediate vicinity where some of the scuds have fallen inside Israel, having family, most of my immediate family, my brother, my mother and sisters live in Nazareth, but I also have family in Haifa and in Jaffa, next to Tel Aviv. And it was very difficult trying this evening, for example, to get a line and to see what they are doing, how they're feeling about this situation. So it's a very, very emotional time for us.
Understandably so. And how do your friends or other Americans here who are not Arab Americans, how do you sense their reaction to you? They meet you in the street, they meet you at work, and they know you're Arab American, they know you're Palestinian, they see a lot of Palestinians have been supporting Saddam Hussein, see him as their hero, the Palestinian hero. What kind of signals are you getting from other Americans?
I guess everyone functions or swims kind of, you know, in a different type of environment, if you will. And in my own environment, I'm a lobbyist. I work in Washington with people usually who are pretty sophisticated politically, who know the diversity of the Middle East, the diversity of opinions here in this country, and so on. So to tell you the truth, I haven't personally experienced any difficulty in terms of any backlash, if you will. But the fact of the matter, since the beginning of this crisis, particularly in the first 2 months of this crisis, back in August and September, our community did experience a backlash resulting from the crisis in the Gulf, which is typical of periods of conflict in which the United States is involved in the Middle East, in which we experience from different sources based on ignorance, attitudes or behaviors emanating from hate mongers directed at people who either have Arabic-sounding names or who have Middle Eastern features. Sometimes they are not Arabs, they happen to be Italians or Jewish or whatever. But I guess people from, with this background do not necessarily discriminate. It's just a racial type of behavior.
I can understand that in a personal way of the kind of signals you're getting, the emotional reactions you're getting. But in terms of official policy now, the FBI, security officials really being much more careful in scrutinizing Arab Americans. Do you think this is creating a problem for your community?
I think, as a mainstream community in this country, we have no problem with the FBI performing its duties and its responsibilities within the law. We are the last community to seek to kind of get in the way of the FBI in protecting the civil rights of citizens in this country against criminal behavior and so on. However, we are apprehensive at certain programs, and particularly this current campaign by the FBI to interview Arab Americans in the manner in which basically it seems to imply that the Arab American community, as mainstream as it is, as loyal as it is, somehow is suspect.
Can I just take a brief break, and we'll continue with you in just a moment after this pause.
America turns to NBC News. Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
From Channel 4, this is a Gulf War News Extra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Puckett. Israel has been attacked. Just as promised, Saddam Hussein has retaliated for America's strike by firing off as many as a dozen Iraqi-designed Al-Hussein missiles. 2 are reported to have exploded in central Tel Aviv and another in a northern town. 1 large building collapsed under the bombardment. Initial reports said one of the missiles was loaded with nerve gas. Israeli radio warned residents to put gas masks on and take shelter. In preparing for attacks by Iraq, the Israelis had been told to prepare a special sealed room in which to take refuge. They'd been urged to put away food and water in tightly sealed containers and tape their windows shut for protection from poison gas. None of the missiles that hit were chemical weapons. Late word seems to indicate that Israel is now planning to take action against Iraq. If it does, it'll be difficult for the alliance that's been fighting Iraq. Some of the partners in Operation Desert Storm are Arab nations and do not like Israel. If Israel is at war with other Arabs, it'll be difficult to hold the alliance together. But diplomatic work is underway behind the scenes to try to make sure the alliance holds. Iraq also fired a Scud missile at Saudi Arabia last night, but a U.S. weapon that had never been combat tested proved itself. The Patriot, an anti-missile missile, streaked into the sky, hit the Iraqi missile, and destroyed it in midair. We'll continue our local coverage in just a moment.
Apollo people. Men from all walks of life who have found that baldness and receding hairlines don't need to mar their appearance. They have found how easy it is to let the professional staff at Apollo Hair Replacement Center consult and then take care of their hair. The results can be satisfying as well as rewarding. No matter how severe your hair loss problem, Apollo has the answer. Call today.
The holidays may be gone, but there's one package being held over just for you. The Money Store Prime Package with fixed-rate home equity loans as low as prime. We're extending our holiday offer for a limited time only to help homeowners pay off credit card bills, make home improvements, anything at all. Trust the Money Store to give homeowners a prime package when they need it most. Call right now, 1-800-LOAN-YES. Program may be canceled without notice.
Besides Fort Campbell, there are between 4,000 and 6,000 Tennessee National Guardsmen and reservists in the Saudi desert tonight. Some of them have played important roles already in the Allied attack on Iraq. Top Tennessee Guard officials say the 134th Air Refueling Group, described as a flying gas station, spent Wednesday night and Thursday in the air refueling the fighter jets and bombers making their assaults on Baghdad.
And he was watching CNN, and I think I was watching another channel located at some installation in the United States. And
another Guard unit from Memphis was active last night on the ground loading the fighters and bombers. General Wallace says he spoke with a half-dozen Guard troop units in the desert yesterday. All are doing fine, he says. And another call-up is possible. The 568th Personnel Service Company of Smyrna was placed on alert. Even if it's activated, Wallace says it may remain stateside with a possible destination of Fort Knox, Kentucky. Governor Ned McWhorter responded to Operation Desert Storm by asking the people of Tennessee for help. He wants them to support the more than 25,000 Tennessee troops in the Middle East.
Second observation is to realize the seriousness of this and pray for peace.
McWhorter says he hopes there'll be few casualties in this war and that innocent people are not hurt. Taking a quick look now at our weather currently in Nashville. It's 32 degrees and clear. Winds from the south at 6, barometer 30.25 and steady, humidity 96%. Stay tuned to Channel 4 for continuing coverage of the latest developments of the Gulf War. NBC will bring you 24-hour coverage of the latest happenings in the Middle East, and Channel 4 will bring you local updates every half hour. Our next update at 2:25.
Channel 4 and NBC bringing you full Gulf coverage.
From NBC News, America at War continues. Here are Garrick Utley and Mary Alice Williams.
The war in the Persian Gulf has taken a dangerous new turn as Iraq launched a missile assault on Israel during the night. Several Scud missiles slammed into a populated neighborhood of Tel Aviv. Initially, it was feared the missiles carried nerve gas, prompting authorities to order Israelis to take refuge in safe areas. NBC's Martin Fletcher was preparing to go on the air from Tel Aviv when the order came to put on his gas mask. He did, and broadcast live reports with the mask on, until authorities announced that it was safe to remove it. After the attack was over, residents of Tel Aviv picked through the rubble. Though the damage was widespread, latest reports indicate that 10 people suffered.